Welcome to A Kind Life. Today I'm joined with Brinkley Davies. How you going, Brinkley?
Going great, thanks. Nice and cozy inside in Tassie at the moment, so happy about that.
Yeah, that has to be artificial heat because there's no way it's warm in Tassie this time of year.
No, it's so cold outside. It's been cold for months. I'm like, just got the fire on real hot.
Waiting for it to warm up, waiting for some sunshine.
Yeah.
Now tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I grew up in South Australia as a surfer since I was about 4. And pretty much through my whole childhood, we had lots of animals and I was very obsessed with all animals and especially marine wildlife. I then got into diving, free diving. I studied marine biology at uni. And for kind of the last decade, I have been doing a whole bunch of stuff all over the world with free diving, with animal welfare stuff, filming, photography. And now I host my own wildlife and free diving trips, which are international. And on top of all that, I also founded my own organization 5 years ago now called Balu Blue Foundation, as basically a mecca for everything that I plan to do and am passionate about for conservation.
And outside of all the, I'm going to put inverted commas, business or your career type things, what else, tell us about yourself. You base yourself in Tassie, you love the outdoors. Tell us a bit about your extracurricular activities.
Yeah, so actually for the last 8 years, I've lived in Northwest Australia, so in Exmouth, WA. And my partner had moved down to Tassie before we met. So when we met a few years ago, we decided to split our time. And we both surf. So a lot of our life is based around that, which is great, as well as just, the outdoors and space. So both places we live, there's a lot of great things to do outside. And aside from that, I spend a lot of my time with my dogs, probably 99.9% of the time. They come everywhere with us. And yeah, life's pretty good. I feel very lucky, but yeah, I think that's a good wrap up.
Yeah, I love before we press record, we're actually saying how some people could say you've bitten off more than you can chew. And that was a pretty good example of, when you do your little introduction there, you do so many things. And I'm so excited to hear about all of them because, you definitely cover lots of different areas. So in regards to your love of the ocean, you mentioned that you started surfing since you were 4. So is that where that passion began?
For sure. I think my family was such a beach orientated family, and my brother surfed and my dad surfed and my mum loved the beach and swimming and everything as well. And we were down there all the time as kids. And then when I got into surfing, that definitely was my intro to everything. It was pretty much all I did for, every day after school, on weekends, school holidays. And surfing in South Australia is so beautiful. We were really lucky growing up, and there definitely wasn't, I think when I was 15, there wasn't any other girls. I used to compete against the boys. Sometimes that was my brother, which is pretty funny. But yeah, as I got older, more and more girls started to surf, and I made some really good friends. And more often than not, you're out there with huge pods of dolphins, whales. We did see the odd shark, and lots of seals and sea lions, and you're kind of just out there in the elements. And I think that's where everything started. I just started becoming really curious of everything because I was, surrounded by these animals and often having quite amazing interactions with them in the surf. And then that kind of just spiraled into learning to free dive and seeing everything underwater as well.
And at what point did you decide that you wanted to become a marine biologist?
I kind of wanted to be either a marine biologist, professional surfer, or a vet my whole life. And as I was going through school, I just wanted to make sure that I got a good enough, it was called a TER at the time, to do either veterinary science or marine bio. And then so I got into marine biology when I finished high school. And then I took a gap year and deferred and went and did a lot of volunteering and kind of decided on doing marine biology because I think it was more suited to, everything. I do, now that I look back, I've done a lot of stuff that's related to vet too, but I didn't want to be a full-time vet because I guess the draw card with marine bio is that it seems like you'll always be in the ocean. So that was always the goal, even though that's not always the case. But yeah.
Yeah. And you also have a huge love for wildlife. I've seen on your Instagram that you're regularly rescuing animals, and you have a lot of passion, and I suppose even raising awareness for people about being, more conscious of when they see animals injured or, in potential dangerous situations. Tell us about that.
So growing up, we grew up on property, and we had a lot of friends, a lot of my mum's friends, had kangaroo joeys, possums. It was very much a wildlife rescue area where there was stuff getting hit by cars. And I kind of learned at a young age from both my parents how to look after different animals. And I always have loved looking after all animals. And kind of as I've moved around, especially living between South Australia and WA for so many years, I used to do that drive by myself quite a bit, which is, 4,000 or 5,000 Ks with my dog. But on top of, what I already knew about wildlife rescue, I learned a lot on those drives, that there's so much going on that should be a lot better than what it is in regards to people hitting animals and not stopping. And a lot of the time, I think it's just people unaware of how to help. When I was living on Eyre Peninsula in South Australia, I lived there for 5 years after I finished university, and I was quite involved with the wildlife care community over there. So I actually raised a kangaroo called Bunji. I'm currently running a book about that story. She was pink. She was about 300 or 400 grams. And she's now about to turn 6, and she lives at a sanctuary over there. But that was a really special experience. And throughout that, I met a lot of really amazing wildlife carers and learned a lot, not just about kangaroos, but about other animals too. And if I didn't travel, I probably would have a lot of rescue animals. But the reason that I don't take on ones longer term is for that reason. But since living in Tasmania, the last year, Tassie's definitely, everywhere in Australia has the issue, but Tassie has more wildlife that needs help in that regard than anywhere I've ever seen. And within a few months of being down here, we had a wallaby joey in care called Fern. We've rescued multiple ones off the road, and I've either looked after them for a couple of months and then passed them on to their next step carer. But I constantly am checking pouches, checking everything down here. It's a really regular occurrence.
Yeah, I was surprised to read on your website that I think the stat was something like 12 million animals a year are injured on roads and need assistance.
Yeah.
Is it,
it's insane.
Yeah. In your perspective, what should be done? How can we advocate to avoid those numbers?
Well, obviously in a lot of Australia, especially on country roads, there are, of course, incidences that are unavoidable. For example, roads that are lined with trees and shrubs or grasslands, and especially driving at nighttime. Obviously, the main things driving at dusk or dawn when those animals that are nocturnal are highly active is high risk. I personally drive so slow nowadays because I just don't want to hit anything. But, being actively aware on either sides of the road and really concentrating is one thing. But then also some measures that could help greatly are things like wildlife crossings, as well as virtual fencing. So it exists. It's basically, it's in little patches around Tassie, mostly down near Hobart, where they have virtual fencing, which gives off a frequency or a sound that's too high pitched for us to hear, but it deters the animals from coming onto the road in that area. And you really notice a difference. So in those areas specifically, there's no roadkill, and then where it stops, it literally starts again. So there's a lot the government could be doing to help. They do it in the States with deer and moose crossings. But yeah, that's kind of on a government level. And on a personal level, I think the major thing is just to stop and check. So the biggest problem that I encounter is people just hitting things and they don't they don't even stop at all. I think that the least thing you can do is pull over and check on it and even call somebody. But yeah, lots of people just hit it and then keep going. I'm not sure if they just don't have a heart, or they don't know what to do, so they just choose to not deal with the situation, which then leaves us dealing with the situation. There's a lot of really great carers down here and people that do care, but it's a astonishing amount. If you ever drive around Tasmania, it's like, on our road alone, we see 2 to 3 possums every day that have been hit, which is crazy, and they're just crossing a really simple pathway, and they have their little habitat and their zone, and they don't often go outside of that. So yeah, I often drive around at nighttime just to make sure no one's hit anything and they don't have, they're not still alive, or they don't have joeys alive, because that's, I guess, the most common thing that we come across is joeys can survive in pouches for 3 to 5 days, and they can be rescued quite easily. It's just people just don't stop and check.
And I think you've put together like some step-by-step type like guide for people to be aware of what to do. Is that right?
Yeah, so a few years ago, when I still had Bunji at home in South Australia, we put together a really basic step-by-step guide to what to do if you find an animal on the roadside, which is really great. But we have, for the last 2 years, been building this mobile app, which basically will be that on a much broader perspective, so that people can have an app on their phone, and like it will be kind of specific to what species it is as to what to do, because it's quite different depending on if it's like a wombat or a kangaroo or a koala or a possum. So yeah, I think it's just something that is really helpful for people. A lot of my friends love animals, but they would have no idea what to do if they hit one, or if someone hit one in front of them. So that's kind of what we've been working on for the past little while.
And something else that is similar but slightly different is that, we've both spoken before about also checking like farmed animals when you are driving and things, because they also can, be in distress or be injured, have issues when yous have gone down to give birth. So that's something else that you're quite active and aware of, isn't it?
Yeah, I actively look out for, especially at the moment, it's winter lambing season. It's awful. The paddocks down here, it's been really horrendous weather, and a lot of the sheep are actually being shorn in winter, which is, I can't understand why they would do that, because they already don't have any shelter. But my goal is with the app that we're building to have it one day as a huge database for all animals, not just wildlife. We will have a section as soon as we launch it for domestic animals or like farm animals, and then farm animal rescues and stuff like that to call, because the issue is with wildlife is there are carers that you can take it to, and vets, but with farm animals it's vets can't come out to help you. It's illegal. So just the other day we helped a ewe that was, the farmer had obviously seen it because he had moved all the other sheep to a separate paddock and locked the ewe that was down in the paddock on her own, and she was being eaten alive by crows, and it was so horrible. And we ended up getting her out of there, but it just, that situation shouldn't happen. But also it's very easy to spot from the road situations like that, especially with crows. But yeah, I'm on the lookout for everything pretty much. I guess that's why I drive slowly. But yeah, the roads around here and the area is very much forest, so wildlife, and then you move inland and it's all rural. And mostly sheep farming. So yeah.
And tell us about founding Balu Blue. Like, it's really incredible. I love checking out the website, because it covers exactly what you said, encompasses so many of your great ideas or things you're passionate about. So how did you come up with this idea?
So actually when I was at university, I was volunteering a lot for a lot of different wildlife rescues and ocean conservation charities, and kind of just getting as much experience as I could to see what I wanted to do. And what I found was it was hard. It's a hard area to navigate, especially marine biology, as to what organizations you might want to work for, or which ones are doing stuff you like and which ones are doing stuff maybe you don't agree with. And because I wanted to do kind of a broad array of things over the course of my life, I didn't want to be working for a charity that like I didn't have a say. And so I decided the smartest thing to do would be to found my own, which was very difficult in the beginning. It's extremely hard. It takes a couple of years. You need lawyers. But all of that came, I just had an idea to basically start Balu Blue as a place where we could do not only marine conservation stuff, but wildlife rescue, and have it so that our mission statement covers all animal welfare, like all animals, not just, specific sections of them, and marine and land-based. So because I wanted to be able to help when things came up that were like urgent. So that's paid off already in the last few years. We've been able to do some really cool stuff and help a lot of people. But yeah, the name actually, just before I founded it, a year before I founded it, I had a dog called Balu, and he was a border collie cross, and he was the best. He was my first dog that I had on my own, and yeah, he was just like the sweetest soul, and just lived at the beach and was the best. And we unfortunately lost him to 1080 Fox Bay, which was wasn't near a national park, wasn't really near farmland. It was just something that, he'd picked off the side of the road. Like, we were in a rural area, but that kind of really, that was like the last push. It devastated me, obviously. It was the worst thing ever. And I wasn't really that aware of how bad 1080 was until that happened. And that was one of the main reasons I founded Balu Blue, and also I really am interested in helping a lot in land conservation and habitat protection that doesn't involve, poisoning and all the crazy stuff that humans do to land, and then call it protecting it. But yeah, so that I called it Balu Blue, and then blue meaning ocean. So it's both. But yeah, we started off doing things like beach cleanups and dive cleanups. I screened a movie. Have you seen Before the Flood with Leonardo DiCaprio?
No.
Oh, it came out maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, maybe a little bit sooner than that. But it's basically a really well put together documentary on different industries that are destructive to the environment, and a lot of them are covering animal agriculture and overfishing and things like that. And I was living in Port Lincoln at the time, which is amazing, and I love it. But it's obviously a huge animal agriculture hub, as well as fish farming. And we projected that documentary onto a refrigerated truck on the front street in the Parklands, and lots of people came and watched it, and there was a lot of silence in the crowd. And I think it's just was really eye-opening for a lot of people to, they just weren't aware, because in those sorts of places, 5 to 10 years ago, people didn't really look things up. They just went about their life and didn't have any interest in changing. So those were the first sorts of things that we were doing. We've always been like a volunteer group, and then yeah, over the years we've done lots of stuff. It's been kind of like a rolling ball, and then from now onwards, I think it would just grow and grow, and we have some big plans in the next few years. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I know as well that you've got like a number of other people working with you. It's not just yourself, is it? There's like a board of directors, and you've got other sort of like coordinators and different things.
Yeah, just actually it's always been real tight-knit little volunteer circle. And to be honest, it's just been people reaching out that, have expertise in areas that we need, but want to volunteer their time to a good cause. And for a lot of the last few years, a lot of our funds have gone to carers that need help, urgently. So when the bushfires were on, because I knew a lot of people in South Australia and Victoria, and just through social media, that needed help, that weren't associated with, the bigger groups like Wires. For example, a lot of wildlife carers are like elderly ladies that just have the biggest hearts, and they just do it off their own backs. And the bushfires decimated so much area. And so we were able to help out, like we're just able to dot donations like to a few places that I knew weren't going to get it from anywhere else. And the sanctuary where Bunji is at, we've been able to help as well over the years, just with covering things like vet bills, and, you know, fencing costs and enclosure costs and things like that. So that's kind of what we've been doing up until now. And then kind of from now onwards, we're going to break it up into certain areas and hopefully grow projects a lot bigger.
And do you rely on fundraising or do you get grants? Like, how does that work?
So we haven't actually got any grants yet. It's purely been through donations from social media to our website. And we only recently, 2 years ago, got DGR status, which is basically means you can take tax deductible donations. And up until we got that, it's obviously very hard to get larger funding amounts. But we really hope with the app, because running an app is so expensive. We want the app to be free, and we want everyone to be able to use it. We want it to be working really efficiently so that it's a go-to resource for wildlife rescue and carers connecting with each other or the general public. And so we're hoping to get like a corporate sponsor or some bigger sponsorships that can basically cover the running costs of hosting it on the App Store and Google Play. One of the biggest challenges we've had so far with building it is we are using a map feature, which we want it to work so that if you're anywhere, you can kind of, it can locate carers around you, which is super challenging to do with Google Maps. So it's very technical actually, but we're really close. And one of the main reasons that I wanted that feature from the beginning is because over time, if people are using it correctly, and they're recording animals that they find, whether they've been rescued or they've passed away, it will be able to record hotspots. And once we have that hotspot data, you can then take that data to government bodies and say, this is the problem, we need a solution, kind of thing. So that was the whole idea in the beginning, is to not only have it as a free resource, but also be able to use it to drive better measures like all around Australia. And it will also be for marine wildlife too, but marine wildlife rescues is lacking greatly in Australia. There's very, very few places that take in marine animals that need rescuing. Even in Tasmania, there's nowhere where someone can, for example, take like an injured seal. South Australia has AMRO, which I used to volunteer at, where they'll take in animals and rehab them and then they'll get released. But there's nowhere in a lot of states that are purely for that reason, which is a bummer, but hopefully in the future there will be.
Yeah. And how can people get involved? You know, like if they jump onto your website and they love what you're doing, like how can they get involved, or how can they help?
So at this point, because we're still working on finalizing everything, we are trying to grow a really solid team at the moment that can help us make the app really successful. So at the moment, everything that we're working on is costing us a lot of money to get the app to where it's at. So donations help us a lot, of course, they go directly to the costs. And then, you know, we will need in the next few months, we're going to be putting out kind of call outs and job opportunities and volunteer opportunities. So we'll post those on our website, and that's kind of the main way people can help at the moment. And in the next few years, hopefully we'll have some bigger projects that people can get more hands-on with. But once we launch the app, we just kind of want to share it as far and wide as possible, because it's one of the main things is we just want it to be really easy to find and easy to use, and also for all the wildlife carers to be on it, all the animal rescuers to be on it. It's a more the merrier situation. Like if someone finds an animal and they have 100 people to call, it makes the scenario a lot less stressful for them. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing. It's been a huge project.
Yeah. And you also as well have launched, I think it was last year or the year before, you launched your own jewelry brand, so Bandicoot Jewelry, which some of the, I think 10% of your profit goes towards Balu Blue.
Yeah, so for a long time, I've always worn a lot of jewelry, especially like sterling silver and gold and things that last over time, and also that I can wear diving. But when it was COVID, we were in lockdown in WA, and at the very end of 2019, I'd been doing a lot of kind of, if I was in Bali or over in Indonesia or anywhere, I was kind of just sussing out how it was with the jewelry, like jewelry building, jewelry manufacturing, and just getting some like really small pieces made for myself. Because I struggle a lot to shop like online, because I get so crucial of ethics of things. And so I was like, how can I do this where I know exactly what's going on, and then also it gives me an opportunity to sell something where it's directly giving back to the organization. So, you know, I know exactly where that money's going and that profit's going to the right place. Whereas with a lot of brands I was working with at the time, you know, they'll be like 1% for the planet or 10% for this, but like for me as someone that was just buying it or supporting them, you just never really know. And so I decided to just like get a few trial pieces made. And I met some really amazing ladies that understood my vision with everything, and also understood my passion for ethics and sustainability. And not only in regards to like longevity and quality of products, but also I had just been to Borneo, I think it was the year before that, and you see over there, obviously there's a lot of really bad deforestation from palm oil, but you also have a lot of really bad gemstone mining, which I didn't even know about. I didn't even know it was like super bad in that region until I went there. So that was another part of it. Of course, I wanted to make sure everything was being made and in a nice environment, to a high standard, but also make sure that wherever everything is coming from, I know. And so it took a long time to find the right people. But yeah, it's really fun. Basically, I already had like 3 collections drawn up just because I just liked drawing and kind of was like daydreaming and have like a little sketchbook. And yeah, those are now like products on our online store, which is really fun. And yeah, there's lots coming soon because it's kind of an endless thing that you can do, which is really fun. But yeah, we're just doing like sterling silver and solid gold at the moment, which is hard to do because it's expensive, but it lasts. So that's the key part.
I love too that you put on the website, you know, like how much you've donated across to Balu Blue. So that's really cool. People can get an understanding of, you know, like what they're contributing to.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, I mean, everyone these days, which I think is good, is there's a lot of people donating to good causes. But we are such a small business, and I think it, like, even for me, like now I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like I've been able to do that just from starting this project, and it's still so small. So, you know, the more it grows, the more we'll be able to give back, which is really cool. It's like really rewarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us about your wildlife expeditions. They're pretty incredible. I've seen some of your YouTube videos and things, like, which also has, I think, a longer history than the expeditions. But yeah, it's pretty incredible. So tell us about those.
Yeah, well, I guess before COVID, I was traveling a lot. So I have been lucky enough to go all over the world with my surfing and freedive trips. And I was kind of I was actually doing a lot of work with tourism boards and different like doco series and stuff like that, to all these different places and having these insane experiences with marine wildlife. And I guess COVID kind of made me be like, okay, how can I like change the way this is structured so that I'm in control of everything? Because I was a guide in water with, you know, sea lions and whale sharks and all of these animals for years in marine tourism. And I have a lot of experience, and I also love like guiding people and showing them like animals. I think it's I think when people see animals in the wild, it's like the first step to them being passionate about being like, wow, that's amazing. And then they take home a really like strong connection to something and a passion to like be involved in conservation. And so I thought, all the places that I'd been, there was a couple of standouts that I'm like, well, I could host a trip here. Like I have all my qualifications to do that, but also I had, because I had been there and I was pretty competent, I could fill the spots. I just kind of, I kind of did it. I set it up with a few different places that I knew already from being there. And actually when I launched at the end of 2019, 2 trips, and then that the world stopped. And I was like, great, I've been planning this for so long. But so those people that were booked on to my trips in 2019 are still booked on and we'll be running them next year in 2023. So they've been hanging on for 3 years, which is so great. It shows how loyal people are. But so those trips are Tonga, which is it's an island off the South Pacific where we go, and it's incredible. I went there, I think 8 years ago for the first time, and you're literally in the water with humpback whales, and it's like nothing else you'll ever experience. They swim right up to you and they're like singing so loud, and you have what's called a heat run sometimes, like a group of males will come through and they're really curious there and quite confident and spatially aware. I guess they don't have the predators that they do, for example, in Western Australia on our coast. They're a bit on edge if you see them in the water, whereas in Tonga they're just so relaxed. It's mind-blowing, and the water's usually really clear. So I've got 2 weeks there in October next year, but I'm actually going to Antarctica in February. I'm working with a company that we decided to launch it. I think it was the end of 2020 or the start of 2021. We released it and it sold out really quickly. I think a lot of people were, it's a kind of a once in a lifetime place to get to, and it was a great opportunity to do so. And we're doing 10 days on the Antarctic Peninsula in February. So that'll be insane. I'm so excited. I've got a lot of friends coming on that one with me. And just because I wasn't busy enough, I am going to release 2 more in July next year. So one of them will be a ocean-based safari type freedive trip in South Africa, and the other one will be a land-based one. So I haven't actually released those yet, but they will be happening. But I'm really excited.
I can only imagine a lot of what you're talking about would be like a once in a lifetime experience for a lot of people. For you, it might almost be second nature. Yeah, but for a lot of people, it would be.
It is. Yeah, well, I guess that's what I wanted to do, because through freediving, especially, like I have opportunities to run a lot of trips that are like that and kind of learning ones. And, you go to a beautiful place where it's a all-inclusive experience, but I wanted to, it's very crazy on these trips. Like I always try to explain to people at the beginning, I'm like, you're going to be so exhausted at the end of this. Like, it's going to blow your mind every day and you're going to just be laying in bed like, what just happened? And so I wanted to only release more trips if they were going to be really epic. So that was my goal, was to do like kind of bucket list experiences as trips. And even though some of these places, like I've been a few times, it never gets old, and every time it's different. So it's super exciting for me always.
Do you have a like certain experience that you like is one of your favorites that you'd like to share?
Yes, I've got a few. I've had some pretty crazy experiences with a lot of marine life and land-based animals over the years. One really notable one was last year, actually, no, 2 years ago, when it was all kind of quiet in the ocean. There was not many boats out, and I was just swimming and my partner was surfing off WA. And, often you do see turtles and rays and sharks. And if you're really lucky, a dugong or a manta ray or something like that. And dugongs are super elusive. They like never approach you. They're often quite scared and flighty. Like if they see you, they'll just swim off. But every now and then you get one that's like really chill and wants to check you out. And I think that they feel really not threatened if you're on your own. And it's happened to me twice, where one time I was on my own and this male dugong swam straight up to me, like, as in I had friends in the boat, so I wasn't diving on my own, but I was just snorkeling. It was really shallow, and they're so camouflaged because they're really light gray color, and it swam straight up to me. And then it was like swimming at me, not in an aggressive way, but I was like, what is happening right now? Like, it was like approaching me and like flapping towards me. And I was just losing my mind underwater, because I was like, what is it doing? Like, I had no idea what it was doing. And it was like trying to play with me. And it's like this huge dugong, like, and so that happened. And then I actually posted a video the other day on Instagram, because I found it again, the footage from another swim I had where it was a similar scenario, and I was in the water by myself, and I looked around me, like to my right, and there was like 4 dugongs, and one of them was a baby. And I was like, holy shit, this never happens. And then I looked under me, and there was like a huge family that had put me in the middle of them, and were like checking me out and like doing little spins. And you know, those kinds of moments. And even my friends that spend every day in the water on the reef, that never happens. It's kind of rare. And I also feel like sometimes I do feel like I have good ocean luck. But I mean, I could rattle off a lot of different ones. Definitely the top thing that's ever happened to me was I've seen like a pod of killer whales underwater in really good visibility, and they just completely swam up and checked us out, and then swam straight under us. Like, I could have touched it on the nose. And they've been my favorite animal my whole life, and they're really hard to see even from a boat. And of course everything's on their terms, but it's like they're so quiet for such a huge animal. And it's like a full moment where time stops. It's like a 8-meter killer whale swimming up to you and swimming underneath you. And that day, all of us just burst into tears. We were like on the surface, like, oh my God, what happened? But those kind of things are just like, yeah, I have a couple of moments like that where I was either like, this could go one of 2 ways, and it always went the nice way. So that's I've had some really crazy experiences like that. And I've been to Africa a few times too, where I've had similar things happen on land. I'm really excited to go back there. It's I miss it over there. It's like one of those places that just like takes your breath away all the time.
And in regards to like free diving, and also you're a free dive instructor, so I guess like tell us, for people maybe who don't know the gist of free diving and how you got into it, like explain it to us.
Yeah. So actually, in the last few years, freediving has become like a really popular sport as such, and there's a lot of people doing it. There's a lot of people involved, which is really cool. I got into breath hold training firstly through surfing. When I was about 16, 17, we used to do quite regular breath hold training. So mostly for big wave surfing, where you're basically getting used to getting slammed and I'm getting thrown around underwater by waves and remaining calm, and all of like the mental challenges that are real baseline to being in the ocean a lot. And yeah, so I kind of started off doing that and learning how your body responds to breath hold. So my introduction to freediving was more from a surfing perspective, where it was the stuff that I learned through that training would really help me out in really quite hectic situations in the ocean, because a lot of the time the places we were, it wasn't calm and beautiful and 35 degrees. It was more like crazy rough, quite life-threatening, and remaining calm was like a key factor. And I think that I'm so grateful I grew up in that environment, because as I've gotten older and as I've been to a lot of these places and been in the water a lot with people that are both competent and not competent, having experience in really bad conditions has played like a key role in what I teach people and like how I do teach freediving. So I did a couple of courses. I've done quite a lot of freedive courses over the last 10 years from there's like a couple of different organizations that that host courses, just like you can go and do a scuba dive course, you can do a free dive course. And free diving is basically holding your breath and diving down. And as you go forward in learning, you learn a lot about your body's reaction to breath hold. So a lot of people can hold their breath a lot longer than what they think. It's, 80% a mental game. And it's more so knowing what your body's going through, physiologically. And it's really cool because if you go do a course, for example, one of the main comparisons that we have is between marine mammals and humans, and the way that our bodies are wired. And basically over time, your body gets more and more resilient and used to holding carbon dioxide. So when you breathe in, you're breathing in oxygen and you're exhaling out carbon dioxide. And when you hold your breath, that discomfort that you feel that makes you want to be like really worried about catching your breath, that feeling is actually from holding in carbon dioxide. And often that feeling is just a discomfort that's like mentally associated with, oh my God, I got to take a breath, but actually you're just used to exhaling that air out. So it's really interesting. And over time you get more and more confident and competent, and you start to learn what those barriers are. And instead of freaking out about it, you start to become comfortable with it. And then obviously practice makes perfect, and you get better and better. But yeah, it's a slow progression. Like the more time you spend in the water, the more comfortable you'll be. And so I had been doing a lot of courses and a lot of trips and a lot of kind of like pretty intense stuff that was freedive related. And so in 2018, I was like, I had done all the courses up until instructor level. And I was like, well, because I'm going to be hosting these trips, I want to be able to teach my customers. And not that I didn't think I could have already with my experience. It's just, of course, it's a huge safety thing as well. Having that, and for their comfort as well. And I wanted to be able to have that before I launched my own trips. So yeah, I went to Med and went to a deep week, which my friend Adam Stern runs. He's got some world records. He's a very, very good free diver. And I did 3 weeks of like pretty intensive training every day. And yeah, I got my instructor ticket. And ever since then, I've been using it on the trips I've been running, instead of like teaching regular free dive courses. As much as I would love to do that, I have too much on my plate. So I kind of just keep up my training myself. And then on my trips I run, I incorporate workshops and stuff like that for people to learn depending on what we're doing. But for example, with Tonga, it's like, and places like that, it's very beneficial to know basics to equalization and know some of the basics that help you get down and look at stuff, and be comfortable with it. And yeah, I've had a lot of friends have really close calls and in unsafe situations. And I think that safety is like top of my list for anything water related with anything I run. So yeah, that's kind of one of my passions as well, is so that people can do stuff without hurting themselves.
What sort of depths can you personally dive to?
Well, to get your free dive instructor ticket with Molchanovs, which is the company that I've done it with, you have to go to 40 meters. So 2 different requirements is like free immersion, where you're pulling down the line. So basically, it literally feels like you're asleep doing free immersion. You're just pulling yourself down and equalizing your ears. So that's one of the requirements. And then the other one's the same, but you're kicking down and then you're kicking up with fins on. And there's a bunch of other requirements too, like no fins, going down to 30 meters, just using your arms. And a lot of it is actually with depth, the issue or the challenge is equalizing past a certain depth. Because obviously the pressure's getting more and more, and you have to make sure that everything's perfectly equalized, and that takes a while to learn. And it takes also a lot of being really in tune with your body to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to know, do you have any fears? Like I'm quite intrigued to know if any of this was ever like you're scared of any of this, or there could be something totally different that's not related that you're scared of.
I mean, I have this thing where, I mean, I've been in a lot of situations where I've been scared, and I don't know if it's just my personality or how I've always been, is ever since I was a kid, I've always been super competitive with myself, like not with anyone else. And I've always been like, I'm gonna like deal with this. I'm the sort of person that if I have an issue, if I'm uncomfortable with something, I'll just deal with it head on. I don't like dwelling on things and thinking about them too much. I'll just do it. So I mean, through surfing especially, I've been in some scenarios that have been terrifying, but then I've also overcome them. But I mean, I don't generally have any like fears that stand out day to day. Like I'm not really scared of too many things that I guess a lot of people are regularly scared of. But I think that also that comes with when you do lots of things that require you to have really good mental control of a situation and ability to be calm. I think it's like the biggest thing that I've been in some scenarios freediving too, where you just got to be like, okay, this is what's going to happen, like, and really calm yourself down. And I've had a couple of those moments, especially actually one time I was diving on the line, which this never happens. And because diving on a line is very safe, you're attached with a lanyard. So you've got a wrist strap on and a little clip on the line, which basically means that you can't float away from it. You're there. And so you can't get lost if something were to happen. And so you've got a safety diver there and everything. And it's a safe situation when you're training with someone. But I was doing a dive that was really challenging for me. And I'd just done a really nice breathe up on the surface, and I was in a really good mental state. And I went down and I got to the bottom. I think it was at like 37 meters. It was like a deep dive and for what we were training for. And you hit a tennis ball. So there's like a tennis ball or a plate at a certain depth. And I ended up going to 40 meters. But when I went to turn, my arm was stuck. And I was like it's really, because when you get to the bottom on a dive like that, you're immediately like, you turn and then you're on your way up, and all you're thinking about is staying calm and just focusing on your technique and coming up and just being really onto it. But as soon as something messes with that, it like flicks you out of being in your little zone. And I was like, I had to just be like, oh fuck. Like I went from being like, oh my God, to like, okay, I just got to handle it. And my lanyard was just stuck. It was like twisted on the tennis ball. And I had to just have a little moment and untangle it and swim up. But that was like, when I watch movies, like I watched a movie the other day about this plane crash, and this girl was in it underwater and she had to unbuckle this thing. And I'm always like, that's like that moment. When I always think about that when I watch movies, I'm like, I think I could handle that moment. But like, yeah, I do regularly challenge myself. I think that's something that I do probably too much.
That's a good thing. You just it's where you grow, as they say, like facing your fears or like challenging yourself outside your comfort zone is where you grow. So obviously that's just something you've always done.
Totally.
Which is awesome. And you were also nominated like for Australian of the Year. What was, what were you recognized for to get that nomination?
I was actually nominated 2 years in a row, and I like, because you just get told you've been nominated, but you don't get told what for or like. So I was, when I got nominated, one of the years was actually when we did a lot of work for the bushfires. So I thought it might have been associated with that. I actually, when the bushfires were on, of course, I was like sharing stuff and trying to get everything out via social media, but there was quite a few organisations that, especially within South Australia and Victoria, we weren't getting much help. And I made this video. It was a really heartbreaking time. It was chaos everywhere during the fires, and I made this video, and it ended up getting, and I had tagged so many smaller not-for-profits or carers, and it ended up getting it like went viral. I've never had a video get so many views, or it was crazy. And a couple of those people called me up the next day, or they were just messaging me like, oh my God, because I was redirecting all the donations to them. and they were obviously just seeing it come in, which is so cool. That was one of the most rewarding things I've done as well. But yeah, the year before that I got nominated as well. And my memory's not that good, but I was doing a lot in 2017 and 18. So I'm not sure exactly which part it was for, but maybe a combination.
Yeah, incredible. And something that we've missed as part of your story actually is like how you went vegan. Is it aligned to, you know, your love of animals, like land-based animals and marine wildlife, or how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I am vegan for kind of all the reasons that you can be. Definitely number one was animals, 100%. And growing up, I never liked meat. I never liked eggs. I mean, I ate it every now and then, like as a kid, but the mentality, as you probably know, is like, especially in rural Australia, people would just like, shut up and eat it. Don't worry about what it is like. And I used to be like, that's really weird. And also because we lived on land and we had pet sheep and, you know, my friends had pet pigs, and I just never really understood the separation. And I kind of always questioned everything. And then when I was about 15, I started watching a lot of like documentaries. And then when I just turned 16, I watched Earthlings, and that was like the last straw. I like went from I already didn't eat meat, but we were like, my parents had a fish like and seafood business for a while. So we had a lot of fish, and I was eating pretty much everything else. And I just went completely vegan. Like I didn't like gradually go into it. I just went, oh my God, and just stopped. And like I was so committed, and I went, and, you know, this was, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago. And I got all the lists that were on all the websites back then. And I used to go into the supermarket and I used to read everything. And now I look back and I'm like, I actually put in so much groundwork back then, because it's quite easy now. But I used to have to, you know, just stand in the supermarket aisles reading stuff, like looking for gelatin and whey and all the things. And yeah, actually I learned to cook so much vegan stuff. Like I put in the time. And yeah, that movie just rattled me so much, like not just in regards to what we're eating, but like fashion and, you know, all the other products that come from animals that people just unknowingly use. So in the beginning, it was 100% purely because I love all animals and I never wanted to support anything that was harming them. And I was mortified learning. And from there on, I actually got pretty involved in like some animal activist stuff in Adelaide, and, you know, some like vigils and protests and stuff like that. And everything that I saw and learnt just like concreted that decision and even harder. And then continuously like getting into marine bio and getting into marine conservation, and it just kept going, all the reasons why I didn't want to support it. And then even like the last 5 years, it's become a huge thing as well environmentally. Like a lot of the work that I'm doing and what I'm involved in and the issues that I speak up about are to do with like land clearing for animal agriculture, and especially like wildlife conflict with like farmers. That's one of the greatest issues I kind of like deal with and see day to day, is like, even in Tasmania, it's like livestock farmers just shooting anything that comes onto their land. And there's so many reasons like why I'm vegan. So when people ask, it's like, but also actually health is, going vegan actually solved so many health issues for me as a teenager. I used to have really bad skin and stomach issues, and it just kind of, it literally all went away. And I was eating super healthy. Like I know you can also eat junk food as a vegan, but I've always loved fruit and veg. So going vegan was actually not very hard for me at all. But yeah, my partner now is like been vegan for 2 years, and he's one of the world's best free surfers. And there's a lot of people in the surfing industry, especially in free diving, there's a lot of people that are vegan or at least vegetarian. So it's really nice now that it's not like when I went vegan, people were like, you're going to die. Like, you know, it was that kind of mindset. And now it's like normal to say you're vegan, which I never thought would happen all those years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you find, like, in the conservation or like even environmental space, do you find that people have made that connection between, consuming animal products and it being detrimental to, to the environment, but also as well, trying to save one species but eating another species?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I run into frequently, and it's probably the most frustrating thing that I deal with, because I don't understand how you cannot marry those two things together. Like, it's so obvious, but there are a lot of people that are in conservation that are in one part of conservation, or they have their one thing that they are like, no, this is the solution, and they don't see the broader picture. And I think especially in Australia, it's like such a broad picture. Like, one of the biggest battles that I have is people that are in wildlife rescue but then they'll hate on like certain domestic species. And I'm like, but like, why do you hate them? It's not their fault, or in conservation, it's like people are talking about ocean conservation, for example, is a massive thing. And I mean, I don't know too many people that are like really passionate and working in that field that still eat meat, or at least trying to like eat less dairy and eat less eggs. And it's just so obvious now that one of the biggest ways to reduce your impact is to cut out supporting that industry altogether. But yeah, it's definitely the old scale means of like being a conservationist it's so outdated now. And so I think it's like, back in the day, they're like, oh, we better, we got to kill all the feral animals and do this. And now it's like, that's not the reason everything's just stuffed up, but there's so much more new information now, and people are starting to see, especially in Australia, it's been a really massive thing that I've noticed for years, and people kind of look at you like you're crazy when you bring up perspectives that are not common. And especially with like, I've known some wildlife carers that are amazing and they care about kangaroos, but they, would never save a cat or something like that. But when cats are a pet, so it's like, there's all these weird overlaps. Whereas for me, I'm like, I love all animals and I don't ever see anything as like their fault, we caused it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's an interesting one that I think is very generational. Like, I think our generation is much more open-minded and they see the bigger picture in regards to like land conservation and Indigenous rights and protecting animals and wildlife and marine wildlife. And so it's like they see it all working together, whereas the last 100 years it's all been separated.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest things that I really do struggle with is, when you meet people that are trying to conserve species or like conserve the environment, but they haven't made that connection. So frustrating.
Oh, it kills me. It's very hard because in marine conservation and freediving especially, a lot of freedivers are spearfishermen. Like, it's one of the biggest reasons why people get into freediving. And I grew up in a small fishing town and I have a lot of good friends that spearfish, but I'm like, okay, if they're promoting sustainability and they'll maybe shoot one big fish that's like a pelagic species that might feed their family for a month, right? And it's okay if they're doing that and that's their belief. But what I don't get is when those people then go to the pub and then they'll eat a steak or they'll buy prawns or and I'm like, but no, this is taking away everything you just said. Like, you are now supporting the larger problem. But it's, for me, because I've been vegan in the most non-vegan friendly towns, I have always had to kind of approach things in like of course, there's been so many incidences where people are just completely closed-minded. They'll never listen to what you have to say. They'll never change. And I just, you got to give up on some people. But I have always tried to speak to people in a really passive way where I become friends with them first. And then over time, I'm just like, oh, but you should try this. Like, you should try this eggplant parmesan instead of in that, like, and just like, and then it's almost like they don't feel attacked. And I think that's been one of the biggest things I had to learn, is because if I ever went up to someone anywhere where I grew up and even if I said the word vegan, people would be like, start giving you shit about something. But now I look back and most of the people that used to do that are now vegan, because they've been like, oh, actually that makes sense now. And I think it just takes a bit of time, but yeah, it's really frustrating though. It's a frustrating existence sometimes. Yeah.
and is there anything that you're working on or plans for the future that you want to share?
I mean, the book, I'm writing a book at the moment, which is about the story Raising Bunji, which I think was like the most involved I've ever been, and the biggest learning curve for me in not just wildlife rescue, but about what we as Australians in history have done to the land and what that's done to species and wildlife populations, and just the way that basically Australians treat kangaroos, emus, like all the native animals that are pretty much our emblems. And that I'm pretty much writing the book about my personal story, raising a tiny kangaroo, which in South Australia, it's illegal. Like there's a law that prevents you from re-releasing wildlife, macropods. So, which sounds a bit crazy, but at the same time, where Bunji is from, and on Eyre Peninsula, if you were to raise a kangaroo that is humanized in any way, which is pretty much impossible to raise a kangaroo without it being comfortable with you, it will always come back, and it will also hop up to people. And it's in that scenario over there, if you were to re-release them, they would hop up to the wrong people and get shot, sadly. So it's like, I'm actually super grateful that she's at, a beautiful sanctuary with lots of friends and very safe. But I learned a lot during that time, and it's basically a story about like, she was like more in tune with me and I was more in tune with her than even I was with my dog. Like we have a crazy bond, and even to this day at the sanctuary in South Australia, I only get to go there once or twice a year. And she's a Euro, so she's a Wallaroo. And if you speak to any carer, they're like the most stubborn species of kangaroo, and they'll bond to one person and then they will not let anyone else come near them. Whereas, other roos will be friendly with one human and friendly with many. But she's been there now for 4 years, and the couple that run the sanctuary are the loveliest people, and she still won't go up to them, and when I go there I can call out her name and she'll hop up to me from the other side of the paddock. It's like makes me cry every time, but it's super special. It's like a really kind of rare, it's like a rare thing, and it was so heartbreaking having to like transition her to be there and to not be with her full time, but it was 100% the right thing to do. And I obviously didn't have like hundreds of acres that she could have lived on forever, but yeah, so at the moment I'm literally writing that story from start to finish. I've got about halfway to go, but that will be getting published and will be out, I think like a third of the way through next year.
Awesome. And is that a children's book or like a fiction book?
No, it's going to be, it's going to be just like a true story book. Not 100% sure how many words yet. Not a novel, but probably 100 or a couple of 100 pages with picture pages and stuff like that.
Amazing. Yeah. That's exciting. And when's the app planned to come out?
We aim for it to be out before summer. So I reckon maybe November-ish, like before summer, because summer's like peak animals and people on roads season. It's very close. We're just trying to fix the maps feature on it at the moment. But basically when we launch it, we'll launch it with a baseline like carers list, and then our biggest goal will to be for everyone that wants to be on it to add themselves onto it, because it's like the more people that are on there, the more contacts people have. Yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited to get it. I really hope that lots of people use it, because it's basically got everything you need to know on there. You can be anyone and pull over and help something.
Amazing. Yeah, I look forward to it. Do you have a favorite quote that you'd like to share?
Oh God, you've got me there. I've got so many quotes, but I'm terrible at remembering them off the top of my head. But well, I mean, I actually just I was just reading a book before, which I have from one of the farm animal rescues, Edgar's Mission. You would know about them. And it just says, if we could live happily and healthy without harming others, why wouldn't we? And I think that's like the best overall quote that covers not just like conservation, but like being vegan and changing your life to like live in that way. I think that's like the best quote that kind of hits the nail on the head. I actually just read it before I jumped on this. I've got a list of quotes written down somewhere, but yeah,
it's one that sticks with you. And what's the best like way for people to get in contact, to follow you? Like, give us all the different details. I'll link them in the show notes, but you've got your website and your own Instagram, so tell us those.
Yeah, so I definitely use Instagram the most. It's like my go-to platform. And then, my website is where I have like all the different things I do laid out, and very like easy to read and clear. And then from there, you can also go to Balu Blue's website, or Bandicoot's website, but all of those are also listed in my bio on Instagram. I do post long form edits on YouTube as well, 3 or 4 times a year. So when I'm on a bigger trip or expedition or something like that. So there'll be many of them next year when we're back out and doing stuff.
I'm excited. It's going to be so good. I love, the footage you've got on YouTube is incredible. Like, amazing to watch. So look forward to there being new additions.
Well, next year will be a big one. I'm so excited to film some stuff in Antarctica. It's going to be crazy.
Well, thank you so much. Awesome. I really enjoyed chatting to you and learning everything that you're doing. You're doing an amazing job, and I look forward to seeing the expeditions and everything else you've got coming up.
Thanks so much. It was lovely to chat.
Thank you.